And welcome to the Shipyard. This is our first edition. I'm Dawn and this is Lucy. What is the Shipyard? This is a vodcast, I don't know what the proper word is, that dedicated to TV show will they, won't they relationships, slow burns, yes, the classic, drag it out as long as possible, relationships that make up so much of TV now and in the past. We're largely going to focus on the past, but there will be some modern stuff. And we're going to be talking about all aspects of will they, won't they's, the tropes, the best kisses, the most disastrous relationships, things that work, things that don't, things we love. And we're going to be starting with the Moonlighting curse, which Lucy will explain in a minute. But disclaimer, first of all, we're not going to talk about soap operas because they're just too different. They go on and on. You can never really have a happy ending in a soap opera. It's a genre all of its own, and it's a huge world all of its own. But they do tend to do will they, won't they very well. And Lucy will have some other disclaimers.
I will.
Well, I'll tell you our personal history of shipping. I have been shipping since Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. I think that was 1983, when I really wanted Hank and Sheila to get together. And since then, my first obsessive ship was Moonlighting. And then around the same time, Davidson Makepeace, Remington Steele, and I've been shipping ever since. And basically, it's been my hobby my entire life. So pretty much like Lucy too.
Very much. Hi, my name's Lucy, as Dawn mentioned. As she also mentioned, my very first ship was Moonlighting. I was obsessed. Everything Moonlighting, as anyone who knew me back then would tell you, it was my go-to ship. Since then, I've been obsessed with any UST on mainstream television, from Lois and Clark in Superman, Mulder and Scully in the X-Files, John and Kaylee in Car Share, Miranda and Gary in Miranda, you name it, I probably watched it. However, we will be talking about those ships and the tropes that are associated with those ships as we go along in this series. But there's probably a massive chance that we will talk about a ship in a show that we haven't watched. Actually, no, we won't talk about a ship in a show we haven't watched. We may talk about a trope or a scenario in a TV series that relates to a show that we haven't seen. So if we don't mention it, it's not because we don't like it. It's probably, like I say, we haven't seen it, but we'll come to that later. Okay, so as Dawn and I have both mentioned, my and her biggest ship dates back to the 1980s classic Moonlighting. I was obsessed with it, and in its heyday, it was massive. It was a phenomenon on both sides of the Atlantic. When it was at its peak, it had episodes that were introduced by Orson Welles, and in the episode Big Man on Mulberry Street, it had songs specifically written for Moonlighting by Billy Joel. It had a massive dream sequence that was choreographed by Stanley Donen, who was the choreographer for Singing in the Rain. So it pulled no punches. It didn't do things by halves, and it liked to break the television boundaries. So what makes it sad, looking back at it 30 years since it ended, is that the biggest legacy that Moonlighting has left behind is the Moonlighting curse. So what is the Moonlighting curse? According to Urban Dictionary, the definition of the Moonlighting curse is when a will they, won't they couple in a TV show finally gets together and it ruins the show. Derived from the 1980s TV show Moonlighting, whose ratings declined to the point of cancellation after the main characters finally resolved their sexual tension. So what we're going to look at is this statement true? Does the Moonlighting curse exist? Did the show lose its viewers and fall by the wayside because of the consummation of Maddie and David's relationship? Was that what killed it? Well, the answer to that is yes and no. But to look into that further, we need to go back to the very beginning. What was Moonlighting?
So, to explain what happened with Moonlighting, we have to say what happened in Moonlighting. So for those who don't know, it was basically he's a detective, she's a model, together they're a murder. Yeah, they're it's a detective series. She's a model who goes bankrupt and takes on the detective agency, which is one of the businesses she's owned, and is being run by David Addison, who's a man about town. I'm trying to think how would you describe David?
Yeah, in today's term, he would be described as a lad, I think.
A lad, yeah, he's a lad, and she's a high class model, and obviously they hit it off, but they're very, very different. So around the it's about the midpoint of season 2, just towards the end of season 2, isn't it? That they've kissed a few times, and obviously it's acknowledged that they have feelings for each other, but blah blah blah. And then in one episode, Maddie suddenly is acting oddly, and eventually David harasses her and saying, "Oh, what's going on?" And she says she wants to go out and just meet someone for basically a one-night stand. And so he follows her, and I'm going to burp. Excuse me. He follows her, and chaos ensues. He ends up in jail, where woman who he'd begun following this woman thinking she was Maddie, but she wasn't. But she speaks to him about why he was following this Maddie, and he realizes he's in love with Maddie, and he goes to tell her, goes to knock on her door, and there's another man, the ever so handsome Mark Harmon, who is Sam, an astronaut, old boyfriend of Maddie, who's back on the scene. So Maddie now has a boyfriend. David obviously doesn't say anything. It all gets a bit mano, punchy. Eventually, David and Sam have it out, and the upshot is that Sam leaves because he realizes that what's going on with there's something very complicated between David and Maddie that he can't come between, and he leaves and leaves a note. Maddie comes home, and no Sam, but there is David in her bed. He claims
Yeah.
he'd taken some painkillers. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what happened is that they had the fight in the underground parking garage, and he says that Sam had hurt his shoulder, he'd taken some painkillers, and he'd gone to lie down in her bed. And I think it was at the time that Bruce Willis had actually broken his shoulder for real.
I'm just pointing behind you because that was the kiss right behind you.
I timed it intentionally for that to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, when Maddie comes home, discovers Sam's not there, but David is. They have a screaming, the most violent fight they've ever had, and she ends up slapping him, and that leads to the sex.
And then things go a little bit strange from there. Yeah. I think we're going to discuss that a little bit.
Yeah. Maddie leaves and goes to her parents' house in Chicago. Eventually she discovers she's pregnant, and she doesn't want David to come and see her. And then it all goes even more wrong when David tries to come and see her, and he ends up in a Gilbert and Sullivan song dance, and
while in prison.
Yeah, while in prison.
Lots of those shirts on dancing in a quarry pit.
We're really selling this, aren't we?
Yeah, we still love it. Yeah, we still love it.
We still love it. It's fantastic. But this is what happened. So eventually Maddie is coming back to LA, and on a train, because she's heavily pregnant by now, and she meets a man named Walter, and she marries him. And meanwhile, David has befriended a woman in Lama's class called Terry, and so then Maddie sadly loses the baby, and the possible Jump the Shark episode is Womb with a View, in which David plays the baby in Maddie's womb. And then by the end of it, let's just say they try and go back to what they started with, the UST, whatever, but it's all been destroyed. And then as a last ditch attempt, they bring in Virginia Madsen as Maddie's cousin, and David has a pretty serious relationship with her, but then that ends and then the series ends. Can you see what happened?
So basically, after the consummation, Maddie and David's they won't they-ness, the series went on for another 2 seasons. There's almost 30 episodes after that, and it's a very strange relationship from the point they get together. Right up until a couple of episodes before, it was the case of the week. It was Maddie and David. It was the banter. It was the arguing. It was the talking at the same time and slamming of doors. The second that from the Blonde and Blonde episode, Maddie's character changed for me. The whole thing of her going into the office and saying that she wants to go find some guy, not know his name, take him to a hotel. It was completely out of character, but also it was not, I think it was out of character for a woman to do generally, let alone that specific character on a show, especially in the mid-80s as well. I think it was kind of strange, but you just wouldn't go back to that hotel, go back to the office, and then even though David persisted, then spill your guts like that. And he was clearly worried about her. Yeah, she still goes out to a bar. She does talk to a couple of guys, and then she does go home. She doesn't, but then Sam conveniently is waiting for her. Suddenly, the first night he's there, they end up in bed together. I mean, if you haven't seen somebody for that long, I mean, she must have really been wanting to get her end away. It was just, it was really contrived. It was, I mean, there's in Sybil Shepherd's book, she actually wrote that there were elements of storylines and times where she thought that Maddie was slightly bipolar, because it was, there were times she was a really lovely character. She was really nice. She was friendly to Agnes. She could have, I think that friendship should have been looked into more. I think where it failed for me is that it didn't have a backstory enough for both the characters. Yes, Maddie lost her money. Yes, I mean, David had a little bit more of a backstory where you find out he was married before and he had a brother. We know Maddie's parents lived in Chicago and she had a cousin called Annie, and there was no support network around these. I think that's where it massively failed. As much as Agnes and Bert were there, I don't think they were utilised as well as they could have been.
I think the main thing with the curse of Moonlighting is that it wasn't one issue that caused this downturn.
No,
there were internal issues and external issues that affected both the development of it in terms of from the production side, things that were going on in there, but also for the viewers. One of the big things, as we know, is that there were huge delays and there were weeks and weeks without new episodes. That in itself killed the audience's ardor for it, and you lost because it had then become an ongoing story. You lost the thread of it because it was what happened.
Well, even before the episode where the episode you said where David follows Maddie after she says she wants to go find some guy, and she ends up with Sam, and he's ended up in prison. He realizes he loves her. That was at the end of season 3. Prior to that, we had the episode "The Straight Poop," which is just a compilation show of different clips, just to kind of give the audience some kind of new episode, because they hadn't got a new episode to show them. It became a bit of a laugh, and it became a bit of a running joke within this series. But when you start taking the mickey out of yourself like that at the expense of the viewer, it's like you're mocking the viewer for sticking with it a little bit. It's like at the end of Sam and Dave as well. The beginning of the second part of Sam and Dave, David's missing. So you've got a whole scene where they at their ABC network, because Moonlighting never shied away from the fact they knew it was a TV show. And they was like, oh, when did you last watch Moonlighting? Well, the last time there was a new episode. I mean, the episodes, there's 5 episodes at the end of season 3, which start with David realizing he's in love with Maddie. Then there's 2 episodes in between that, where Maddie realizes she's got feelings for David, but she's with Sam. Then there's the I Am Curious Maddie when they get together. And then there's To Err as Human, which is the culmination of season 3. And it's the episode the morning after Maddie and David sleep together. Those 3 episodes took 13 weeks to air on US TV. The first part of that episode aired on the 3rd of February. Yeah. The next episode aired on the 10th of February. The next episode after that aired on the 3rd of March, and then after I think it was 3 weeks after that I'm Curious Maddie aired, and then the last episode from I Am Curious Maddie to Air as Human, there was a 5-week gap in the scheduling between those 2 episodes, and I think it might have been around the time that Bruce Willis did injure his shoulder. It was around the time that Sybil Shepherd was pregnant with twins, so suddenly you had a massive factors preventing these episodes from being filmed. I don't know how long Bruce Willis was out once he injured it. I think it was a skiing accident in March '87. So those that filming obviously got delayed for 2 or 3 weeks, and Moonlighting wasn't like other TV shows that aired at that time. Whereas most TV shows, they're made by a production company, they normally film within 7 to 9 days, and then they're sold to the network. Moonlighting was the only one that ABC produced themselves. They didn't have to pay the money for the license fees, and at the time it aired, it was the most expensive TV show ever made, but it would take twice as long to film, which is why every other TV show at the time, a full season would run for 21, 22, 23 episodes. Moonlighting never made that many out of all 5 seasons. They never reached that target. So when you get to halfway through a season and you're trying to get the I Am Curious Maddie episodes aired in February, which is around the sweeps, there should have been another at least 5 or 6 episodes to lead them up to the season finale in May.
Oh yeah.
And there weren't, and so that must have put pace to all that. And again, if you don't see something for 5 weeks, it's kind of off it, and you don't know. You lose interest.
Yeah, you lose interest. You lose the drive when it's such a cliffhangery type situation as it is through those few episodes. It becomes, you're desperate to see it, but that desperation does wear off if you have a big gap. You're going to be watching something else at that time on a Thursday or whatever. So and that is something that was internal, and there was a lot of internal issues. Obviously, Sybil, as we call her, Maddie, Sybil falling pregnant and with twins, so it was much harder to cover up, and it was a difficult pregnancy, wasn't it? She had health problems with it. That was obviously a huge thing, and I think she got a lot of stick for that it was a lot of the blame was put on her, that she got pregnant, so they had to write her out to a degree so she wouldn't be in every episode. But that was the 80s.
But you also think, though, if the network owned the series, and they knew they were never going to get a full 22 episode run, why didn't they do? Because it was the same network that owned Bones. When Emily Deschanel had her first pregnancy, there was a split series. There was like the first part of the series. At the end of that season, the character does reveal that she's pregnant with Booth's baby, but then there's a break, and then it comes back later on, so it gives her a chance to go away, have the baby, come back, resume that season. But it just kind of, I think they said that they filmed a whole load of episodes with her for season 3 before she couldn't film anymore, and then when they came back to film season 3, they were shoehorned in and worked around them. But it was just the way they went about it. I mean, if you knew this, you've got a Will They Won't They TV series, the very first episode, the TV advert, it says a new romantic comedy. From the get-go, it was a Will They Won't They. A romantic comedy is about 2 people being in the same room together. Season 3, I think Maddie was absent for 8 episodes or something ridiculous. You can't have a Will They Won't They when they're not in the same room. But it's just my point.
They should have delayed filming or something once they knew that Sybil was pregnant and couldn't film.
That was my point.
Just carry it on.
Yeah, because if they knew that they were only going to have 16 episodes, most US TV series go from September to May. So any TV show that is on terrestrial TV or network TV in the United States always gets preempted. You'll have 2 or 3 new episodes. You'll miss a week and have another new episode. Might take 3 or 4 weeks off at Christmas. Might take another week off at the Super Bowl or Easter or whatever. They never air new episodes back to back constantly for that 8-month window. But if they knew that Moonlighting if they knew it was going to be 16 episodes, forget September to December, have your reruns, but have a back-to-back 16 episodes from January, and give them chance to come back, recover, have the babies, do whatever, and then get your audience back by showing them weekly and giving them time to catch up and have a few episodes that were, and they were delivering. They were, I mean, there's an interview with Curtis Armstrong on maddieanddavid.com website where he says that they'd go away, they'd film an entire scene, and then suddenly Glen Gordon Cannon would send down a script and they'd have to redo the whole thing again.
Yeah,
it was
another huge thing. Was Glen Gordon Cannon, because he was everything. He was basically the main writer. Even though they had writers, he would rewrite everything that the panel of writers would bring in, and he was in control and seemed to be a real auteur, you know, that everything had to be exactly a certain way for him, which delayed writing. And as you said before about them speaking over each other, that meant the scripts were longer, so there was a lot more to write, and so everything just took longer. And it didn't you say to me, not on screen, that it was the most expensive TV show at the time, because of all these production values.
I think most TV shows at that time were averaging $900,000 an episode. I think Moonlighting was $1.5 million.
And it wasn't all internal, was it? There was a writer's strike, which is referenced in the Straight Poop, I think.
Yeah.
That obviously caused problems for all.
That was
TV.
a massive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it did a few years ago. I think back in the early 2010s, I think 2012, 2013, there was a writer's strike in the States, and all the shows had limit. Everything got cut short, like House, Chicago Fire, 30 Rock. All of those suddenly didn't have any new episodes. They all wound up with only like 12 episodes in that specific season. The last time it did happen was in March 1988, and it went on for 6 months. So I think, so in season 4 of Moonlighting, that was the season where Maddie goes to Chicago and she comes back and she marries Walter Bishop. There were plans to have, I think the last episode of that series was when Maddie and David decide to make a go of things. It's the one after they admit their feelings for each other after Terry has the baby. After that, there were meant to be more episodes to build up to the finale. There's meant to be a couple more after that. There was even meant to be a 3D episode. It was meant to tie in with Coca-Cola and with the Super Bowl. And that even
shows you how big it is, how huge, how hugely popular it was.
Yeah, and 3D glasses were even produced because of it. I mean, because Moonlighting constantly broke boundaries. Like you say, it had that musical episode with Gilbert and Sullivan. It had there's a whole claymation scene in one of the episodes where it's a conversation between David and Maddie, where she's turns into a claymation witch, then a maiden, and she turns him into a frog. There was a whole black and white episode. There was numerous dream sequences, but it was, when it was at its peak, it was amazing, and it was refreshing because they were trying things that people didn't do before, but at the same time, sometimes it was trying too hard. Like you said at the very beginning, it was advertised, it was a romantic comedy. You don't need to have all the gimmicks. Sometimes you just put them in a room together and let them have a conversation. I mean, one of the best episodes of Red Dwarf was Rimmer and Lister when they were marooned on a desert, on a planet, and they're just talking to each other for most of the episode. And so sometimes you don't need to have all these extra things to say, look, we're bigger and better because we do this. Sometimes just put 2 people in a room and have a conversation, which obviously was lacking in that season because they weren't in a room together. So
do you think that they built it up too quickly, that they got together too quickly? Or, you know, obviously the chemistry between them is absolutely intense, off the scale. I don't even think
from the pilot.
Yeah. So do you think perhaps the curse is not, I mean, the curse obviously is caused by multiple problems, as we said, but is one of them that they just reached a peak far too quick?
I think the fact that I don't know the timeline of how it happened. I don't know whether, I know when they filmed it, Sybil was pregnant when they filmed the episode where they did get together. So maybe he got them together because she was pregnant. I don't know that as fact. But I think there is possibly some truth in it. I think if that hadn't happened, they might have stretched that out a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
I think it did kind of come out of nowhere a little bit. That whole Blonde on Blonde episode we knew there were episodes we knew how they looked at each other. We knew that these two characters cared about each other. It did kind of it did feel like it came out of nowhere a little bit. I would have liked to have a little bit more build up to it.
Yeah,
but
I think
but
in
sorry.
most will they won't these, when you're building up to a resolution like that, there needs to be normally there's an emotional reason. Quite often it's somebody has to make the decision, are they going to leave the country, or are they going to change job, or there's always something that pushes them, because there has to be a reason why when they've not expressed themselves all this time, why they suddenly think, no, now's the time. So for to have it just be that Maddie wanted to get laid, and he was like, well, if you want to get laid, I want it to be me, kind of thing, and then he realizes, no, actually I love her. That's not the best motive. Well, no, that sounds awful, not the best motive, but you know what I mean. It's not dramatically a very strong reason. It's just the case of, I want to have
the next episode I thought was quite not where I think it was Sam and Dave, or it might be the one before that, where she goes to his house and they have that conversation, and she says
when she's wearing sneakers for sneaking.
Sneakers for sneaking, yes.
Yeah.
And they have a really lovely moment, and that scenes like that, you think you can picture this couple together. You can see this is where the chemistry comes from. What I have an issue with is, from the second they get together, is Maddie's character.
Mm-hmm.
And so and the writing, nothing against Sybil Shepherd. It was some of the things that Maddie did, and some of the, I think one of the ones for me is, okay, there's a few issues I've got with this. To err as human, it's the episode of the morning after, and Maddie's like, oh, I want to pretend it never happened, let's make a pact, we'll just be friends. And so for somebody that 2 episodes before was completely in love with him, she slept with him, and then suddenly she doesn't want to know. That isn't somebody that's in love with that other character. And then at the end of the episode, again, this is the writing, not the character, David, they pull up to the side of the road, they've slept together twice more since the night before during the day, and David says, look, I didn't come dressed for the party, and she says, oh no, I take care of my body. But yeah, she still ends up pregnant in the next series. So they then spend another month together. He's thinking that she's taken care of. Yeah, that was an issue for me. And then an episode, A Trip to the Moon, they go on this date. It starts off a bit late. She picks up at 8 o'clock. They have a little bit of an argument, but then it kind of blows over. She takes him out. She doesn't want to go to a bar. She doesn't want to go to a movie because they'd all started, which isn't true. Movies start after 8 o'clock in LA. They start till gone midnight. But they just, and then at 2 o'clock in the morning, they end up in a laundromat. Not being funny, what were they doing for the 4 hours leading up to them to be in a laundromat at 2 a.m. in the morning? I mean, there's enough to do in LA. If you want to be romantic, go down the Santa Monica Pier and walk down to the, or find a quiet romantic restaurant that probably open late, or go to Hollywood Boulevard and find a cafe. It's like, it was so contrived.
Yeah.
But it was nice to have the romantic moment of them dancing in the laundromat together. But even then, she's like, what am I doing with you? I love you, but why am I with you? And it's like, well, if she's thinking that, what is the audience supposed to think? So it's like, well,
yeah.
I mean, okay, if she doesn't want you with him, why are we pushing for these 2 characters to get together when that one of those characters isn't even sure?
And do you think that, I think that is one of the biggest problems, is that in other UST shows, you really get the sense of them loving each other, and you do with Maddie and David to a degree, but as you said, it is hard to imagine them in a relationship, because what has been the majority of the relationship is fighting, fighting, making up, being in a psychological way, that's not healthy. But it makes you think, well, how can they be in a relationship if that's going to, and there's no explanation for how that would work. You can't be telling your partner you hate them and slapping them when you're in an actual relationship with them.
No, and it's also, again, this is, I know there was a handful of female writers on Moonlighting, but like we said before, everything then went through Glen and Karen afterwards. I don't think he wrote women very well. Because every single thing, I know she wasn't there for a lot of the season, so that kind of went against her, like, unintentionally. But everything happened was David was always the one. She was always asking things of him. It was always him that was having to do this, him having to do that. And it was an episode in Father Knows Last. He's David expressing his emotions to Maddie's father on the plane, explaining to him what happened. And he says that he's given up his pride and cut himself up into tiny little pieces to please her. And it's like, and it has always been on him. And I think all the way through that whole story arc, there was never any doubt in my mind how David felt about Maddie.
No.
Maddie, on the other hand, there were times you think, okay, she does love him, but then other times you thought she's indifferent. You know, it's like, what is... And the other thing about that whole Chicago thing to me is that there's a scene when she finds out she's pregnant. She's coming back from the hospital with her mother, and she turns to her and says, I don't know who the father is. Yeah. Or when she comes back to LA after marrying Walter Bishop, she tells David he's not the father.
How did she know that?
Exactly. You know, not being funny, the whole, even though like televisionally it was 13 weeks, that whole story arc takes place over the space of possibly 7 days, if that. She sleeps with the 2 different guys over the space of a week. How's she going to know who the father is? She's not. So how can the writers say in one episode doesn't know who the father is, but yeah, she comes back from Chicago to LA, and she tells David that he's not the father? And also, you're letting the audience down, because the audience want these to get together. They want this baby to be David's. Let it be David's, you know, or let her say, I don't know who it is, but I want it to be yours, so we'll say it's yours, or have some kind of compromise. But it missed so many opportunities.
It was like that Glen Gordon Caron didn't really like Maddie, and so he made her as the bad guy so often. David was rarely the bad guy, and it kills your affection for the, as you say, how can you want them to get together? So something that we will definitely come back to talk more about Moonlighting in other editions, because
without a doubt,
there's so much to talk about. But so let's talk about the curse itself. How it affects every show, every single UST show, every single will they, won't they. Are you afraid of the Moonlighting curse? What you have to worry about the fact that if you get these 2 together, whoever they are, the show will fail. It's something that affects, 30 years later, almost 40 years later, we're old. It's still talked about.
It's so still relevant.
It really is still relevant. And the Lucifer, I know the Lucifer writers and producers have talked about it. It's something they're aware of. That they were very cautious about getting Lucifer and Chloe together because of that. So they have to throw in MacGuffin, a reason to keep people apart. Lucifer has the best ever. He's the devil. No better reason not to get together with the devil.
We started on Tom Ellis. It's like,
yeah.
But talking which, but sorry, carry on.
No, you carry on.
No. I was going to say, talking about Tom Ellis, his role of Gary in Miranda, that worked really well because they got together right at the end. That works really well. You build it up, get together, happy thing. Then there's no chance for them to, because like we ship these people so long, we don't want to see all the crap that might come afterwards. And I think, but it could go the other way. Like Dempsey and Makepeace, everyone really wanted them to get together, but then they didn't get together. But is that a good thing? Dempsey and Makepeace was all about solving crimes. It was about the dynamic of the 2 completely contrasting male-female cops.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. It was great. And unfortunately, ITV decided not to renew it after the 3rd season, and they never had the chance to get together. There was hints that there was some kind of feelings between them in the last episode. Nothing was acted on it. It ended that Makepeace left, but then Dempsey persuaded her to come back. The end.
Yeah.
But would we have wanted to watch it as with them as a couple? Because, not being funny, I would want two policemen worry, like, you know, they couldn't have done it because they worked together. They could never have been romantically involved, and it probably would have detracted from the series itself had they been a couple. But then in other shows, it does work when that happens. But
Bones has made it work. Not Going Out has made it work. Not Going Out has completely changed the dynamic of the show and just changed it from a flat sharing will they won't they to a family sitcom, and it works because there's enough in the writing, enough in the characters to have it. But for other shows, it's just I'm trying to think of other shows that have failed, and I really can't.
I think there's a few. I think once Niles and Daphne got together,
yeah, that's true.
I mean, they had that relationship build up for years, and then when they got together, I think interested Wayne a little bit.
I think that's the kind of the thing I feel bad about, is that I want to defend the Moonlighting curse and say, no, it wasn't just because they got together, it was because of all these other things. But then I found myself looking at shows like The Upper Hand, where after they got together, I was like, you know, I have lost interest. I have to admit it. I don't understand the psychology of it, but it is true.
I think what it is that Moonlighting was one of the first. I mean, there was Remington Steele, there was Just Good Friends, there was other shows in the 80s that kind of had a will they won't they feel.
Yeah.
I think maybe even before that, I Dream of Jeannie. Once I Dream of Jeannie, when they got married, the audiences kind of fell by the wayside. I think what happened, Moonlighting was, they did it in a spectacular style. I think it was because it was infamous for the fighting on set. It was infamous for being late. It was infamous for being expensive. And because it was so massive, for it to have such a fall from grace, as it were, it was the most famous show of that kind to go the way it did. And I don't think there's ever really been anything to go quite that spectacularly since.
No.
But also,
I would say probably Friends, maybe. Friends is maybe the closest, you know, Ross and Rachel in Friends. And when they kissed, you know, that was huge. People were watching it in bars and groups and cheering and stuff.
Yeah.
But obviously, Friends is the same as shows like Grey's Anatomy or any ensemble show, is they have other relationships to focus on, to fall back on. And I think that's the only way you can do a ship well, is have another couple to focus on afterwards. Right, okay, so I think the way you can avoid the curse is you wait until the end of the show. You know, hopefully you get advance warning, this is going to be the last season. You can get them together, not in the last episode, because we do like to see a bit of them together, you know, in the first whatever first everything. If you've got an ensemble cast like I can't think of another one other than Grey's Anatomy.
Bones and Castle worked really well because
Bones and Castle.
That was one where they did work. They had that ensemble around them. Bones, especially at the end of it, they'd been married for 5 years with 2 kids, so that was one where it did work really well. But it had a massive supporting cast around them, and that worked really well.
And it still had the stories, the murder, you know, the mystery kind. You have to have something else.
Yeah, I think that's what makes them stand out, is because even you still have their relationships, but it's secondary to the main stories that are going on, the mystery of the week. Yeah. Whereas there were so many episodes of Moonlighting where it just became about their characters and their relationship, and there was nothing else for them to fall back on in that episode, where some scenes, especially in season 4, they feel dragged out just to fill that hour. Yeah. But it's still love it.
Yeah, we do still love it. Having said all this and how horribly wrong it went, when it was good, it was absolutely the best. And there's a reason people still talk about it. It's not just because it feels so spectacular, it's because it was so good. Everybody wants to emulate that level of chemistry.
Even now, I've just finished watching the final season of Moonlighting. I haven't watched it in years. And even though they're not together as a couple, if those episodes had aired at the beginning, before they got together, they'd have been great episodes. And they're still great episodes, but the chemistry wasn't really there. They kind of just feel like they're just they come in, they're doing the job, they're going home again. I mean, some of the episodes were really good, but you just kind of think they're just trying to trying to get back what they had before, and it didn't work.
And something else we haven't mentioned is that Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd's relationship wasn't great. And so if that wasn't good, so you're saying they were just doing the job and going home was probably true. So as Bruce Willis's star was on the rise with Die Hard and things, he was becoming huge, and it created a divide.
And she just had twins, She's probably the last place she wanted to be was in her trailer at 6:30 a.m. getting makeup done. When she had 2 new babies at home, you'd want to be with your kids, wouldn't you? And like you say, Die Hard. I watched the episode the other day where David takes Annie to Hollywood Boulevard and they're tearing down a Die Hard poster in the window behind him.
It's obviously something that's going to come up. The idea of when you get your couple together, if you do at all, but you should. We agree you should at some point.
I think that's why there were so many dream sequences. Even in Miranda, there's a scene where like she's in the psychiatrist's office and Gary comes in and proposes and she turns out she's daydreaming. It's because the audience wants to see them kiss. They want to see them get together, but then we don't want to see them get together. So that way they're kind of ticking the boxes without ticking it. It's like, we'll tease the audience a little bit. And then it's a trope that have been done since the beginning of TV time, It's like,
oh yeah. And it's something we're going to talk about tropes. We're going to have episodes devoted to specific tropes, like the dream sequence, like the surprise, I have an ex-wife or husband, or
I've just got married.
Yeah, I've just got married. Exactly. Moonlighting did cover a lot of the tropes, and we'll be doing that. We'll also be having episodes focusing on specific shows. As you mentioned, Who's the Boss and Upper Hand is one we're going to do soon. There'll be a lot of other shows, and we'll do other fun stuff like watch alongs, as I say, our top 5s of things. But something that Lucy mentioned earlier is that we have not seen every show. Much as it feels like we haven't. And so that's when one aspect of the shipyard is going to come into play. Lucy's going to tell you about that.
In the upcoming episodes, Dawn and I will be referencing various tropes, like she's just said, and we'll talk about how they relate to certain episodes, but there will be shows that those tropes will be referenced to, but we wouldn't have seen them. So we haven't seen everything. So what we want is, what we're going to be calling is our shipwreck section. So what we want you guys to do is to recommend a TV couple or a UST in a TV show that you think we should watch. We haven't seen everything. So what we want you guys to do is to tell us the name of the show, tell us the name of the couple, who they are. And also if you want to recommend the top 3 episodes that really highlight the UST, the relationship, the sexual tension that those characters display. And we will go away and watch them. And then we might review them and come back to that TV show in a later episode. So if you want to give us your TV show, then we'll go away and watch it.
Because we need, as much as we would like to watch every single ship, for example, if you recommended a ship in Supernatural, we don't have time to watch 20 seasons or something, or 11 or however many. So 3 episodes, just that to sum up a relationship is an idea. But if you want to send us a shipwreck, all of our contact information will be below this video in the box below. You can contact us via Twitter or Instagram, and any disclaimers will also be below. The legal stuff, we just have to say nothing is ours, no copyright, this is all fair use. Oh, it's that lovely scene behind you. Oh, it's where she's sneaking in her sneakers. I really do think that that's from the final episode ever.
Lunar Eclipse is the last ever episode.
Last ever.
I watched that the other night and I did get a little bit choked. It was like, even now it gives me the feels. It's like, it's actually quite sad. Yeah. And we didn't go into the whole Annie and David relationship, but I just, that's another topic. Maybe that's a conversation for another day.
yeah, we'll hopefully we'll have a lot to talk about with a guest in future. That's something.
Watch this
Yeah,
space.
yeah. Watch this space. We'll hopefully have a guest. And so that's us. That's the shipyard. I hope you've enjoyed our ramblings because we know that's what they are.
We
But
ramble
maybe
a lot.
maybe you feel the same way we do and you just enjoy listening to people talking about these shows. Hopefully you do. If you like us, subscribe or follow us, and we'll let you know when we have any new content. And we'll always be happy to hear about your opinions on what we said in comments, or if you agree or disagree. And hopefully we'll be back. Yeah, be nice. Hopefully we will be back very soon. I suspect our next topic will probably be who's the boss and the upper hand, comparison between the two. And until then, thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
See you soon.
See you soon.